Hey, good morning, everyone. It's CJ, aka Carlos, or vice versa. Hopefully, everyone's having a fantastic day so far. It is Saturday, October the 15th. Very excited today to be presenting OMC Simulcast. Today, we're going to be simulcasting the Schiller Institute's Build the New Paradigm, Defeat the Green Fascism. So, as many of you aware, there is a Green New Deal that is attempting to take place, globally. And this conference that the Schiller Institute is putting together is just a counter to that, an attempt to talk through some logical things in terms of, how we go about making inroads. Helga Zepp-LaRouche will be one of the guest speakers, as well as just several other well-respected, not only people associated with the LaRouche organization, but also people, journalists, and so forth. So this is going to be kicking off here in just a moment. I want to thank you for tuning in. And we'll bring this up here as soon as it gets started. So enjoy. Thank you.
Might be low, pardon me. That's okay. And after that, I will introduce Helga Zepp-LaRouche. So once the music goes live, the live stream is going. Thank you.
He's got the whole world in his hand. 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 He's got the woods and the waters in his hand. He's got the woods and the waters in his hand. He's got the sun and the moon right in his hand. He's got the whole world in his hand. He's got the birds and the bees right
Good morning. My name is Daniel Burke, and this is the Schiller Institute Conference of October 15, 2022. Build the new paradigm, defeat green fascism. For those of you who are watching the stream online on the Schiller Institute YouTube channel, please like and share and subscribe, absolutely. And I'm looking at a wonderful audience of people here in Manhattan. Fabulous to see you all, really good to see you. So allow me to make a couple of brief comments here at the beginning of our event. We gather here today in the midst of extreme strategic danger. The end of the neoliberal system has come, and it's brought with it catastrophic economic collapse and an extraordinary danger of thermonuclear war. We gather today with a purpose in mind, which is to strengthen and grow an international movement with powerful youth leadership to bring about a new paradigm of peace through development. We see the adumbrations of an age of reason in which nations will collaborate for the common benefit of mankind. We see an era that Mr. Lyndon LaRouche envisioned, an era of the world land bridge.
People are clinging to the delusion of something they're going to lose. They're unwilling to accept the reality that we, as a soldier in war, sometimes has to face. People are clinging to the delusion of something they're going to lose. They're unwilling to accept the reality that we, as a soldier in war, sometimes has to face, the reality that we must choose a new road. So what must we do? We must use the precious little time available to us to organize around alternatives which we may not yet have the political support to implement, but which will work. And when there's obviously no other alternative, masses of people will rally around these things. But if they don't know about these ideas, we don't organize around these ideas, then when the time of crisis comes, they'll just go crazy because they don't have a clear conception of an alternative. That is the world situation today. An immoral civilization is going to its doom, a self-imposed doom. We're well rid of it because it would kill us sooner or later anyway. The question is, have we the courage to adopt an alternative? And do we know what the alternative is? We must establish the axiomatic rule, not a do's and don'ts list, but the axiomatic rule, that no policy must be made which is not consistent with the fact that every human being is made in the image of God, and that their life is sacred on that account. Not only that their biological life, but their right to development and their right to participate in society on the basis of that principle. That relations among states, relations within states, laws passed by governments must submit themselves to those principles. The only hope we have is to look at this horror and turn this horror of Africa, horrors which are similarly represented in other places, and turn that into a lesson quickly and say, this is what we are seeing. We are seeing a great civilization which is destroying itself because it has denied the right of human beings in Africa and elsewhere, the right to be treated as persons created in the image of God, has denied them the right to participate in their society, the right to honor their ancestors for what the ancestors gave them, the right to give their posterity what their posterity has a right to expect of them. And we must restore law, that principle of law. We must use the crisis, which discredits this enemy of ours within, this great financial crisis, this collapsing system. We must intervene in that, introduce a new dimension of passion into that, and say we need a new civilization. We need the right turn in the road as we go from the broken past to the hopeful future.
It's my honor to introduce the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute, Helga Zepp-LaRouche, to open our event.
Hello, dear young and not so young friends from around the globe. Let me start with an optimistic note. This war we are engaged in against an international oligarchy, which has driven the civilization to the edge of nuclear extinction, and for a better future of mankind, that battle can be won, or that war can be won. And I want to tell you against the argument which you have heard many times, you can't do anything anyway. Those above there, they are too powerful. Well, our two courageous members, Kynan Tisselwaite and Jose Vega, just a few days ago demonstrated that ripping the cover from the warhawk AOC, dressed in sheep's clothes, caused the better part of the opponents of the war with Russia, from Tulsi Gabbard to Max Blumenthal to Tucker Carlson and many others, to comment with full support on their intervention. And I think we have hit by now around 7-8 million on the tweet alone, but then other people broadcasted it as well. So we probably have, between 10 and 20 million people who have watched this. And this is just the beginning. Well, we are in the early phase of a world revolution where the largest part of the world population is already in the process of building a completely new economic system. And larger segments of the population in Europe and in the United States are revolting against the politics of an establishment which are destroying the material basis of existence for most people. And I think one thing is obvious. If we can pull humanity back from the brink of the abyss of thermonuclear war, it will be the courageous activities of the international LaRouche Youth movement that we are building, which will play a major role. And our conference today will be a powerful prelude to that fight. It may be difficult to conceptualize what it means when I say that we are in the worst crisis of mankind ever, given the fact that universal history is not exactly what people have on their screen every day. When you are 20 today, you were exactly 1 year old when September 11 occurred. And that means you have lived your entire life in a world which was affected by a United States in which basic aspects and civil rights of the US Constitution had been eliminated. A world in which senseless interventionist wars in the Middle East and elsewhere cost millions of lives of civilians, women, and children. But it was not like Ukraine today, where hour by hour you get the coverage about the horrors of these wars. These wars, which killed millions, were anonymous. They became the sort of new normal. Somehow one knew about it, but it didn't really enter your life. When you are 30 today, you were not even born when the Berlin Wall came down, which was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. So you have no sensuous memory of the incredible drama, what it meant that the communist system of nearly 70 years vanished, and everything with it. The Cold War, the military blocs of NATO and the Warsaw Pact. NATO remained naturally, but the Warsaw Pact or the unbelievable scenes of people climbing up the wall when it was opened, hugging, embracing each other, where shortly before people had been shot when they tried to overcome the Iron Curtain from the east to the west. And naturally, when you lived in the so-called West, the United States or Europe, you had and have mostly little knowledge about what daily life is like in Nigeria or Ghana or India or Peru. And vice versa, people in the global South have no clear idea what the crucial issues are in Italy or Slovakia today. Also, the number of people who still have first-hand knowledge of what World War II was is shrinking rapidly. And in subsequent generations, and the cultural paradigm which took place had the effect that the real understanding of what war is like was replaced more and more by the idea of the virtual reality of video games, where you begin a new war game once you lost the last one. Now, we are in the worst crisis of human history ever. And I'm saying that because we are faced with the immediate danger that because of idiocy, intention, or by accident, we could have a thermonuclear war practically any moment. As we are sitting here, a nuclear war could start, or in a few weeks or a month, because red lines have already been crossed. And while the greatest part of the 8 billion people living on the planet today are completely unaware of it, life on Earth could end completely. Not immediately. In the initial nuclear exchange, only a few billion would die, but the remaining billions would die in the following weeks and months of nuclear contamination, of starvation, of cold, of burns, robbery, despair. As Kennedy had said, the ones who will die first will be the lucky ones. And then, after the last human being has died, there will be no memory left of the struggle of all these generations for progress, from the early forms of the Homo sapiens about 300,000 years ago to the present. No memory left of the scientific discoveries over the millennia, of great poetry and music, of Confucius, Beethoven, or Einstein, nor about you. Gone, out, delete. This is the unparalleled crime of those people who are talking about preemptive nuclear strikes or limited nuclear war, because no such thing exists. Once you use one nuclear weapon, it completely changes the nature of the war. And in all likelihood, all nuclear weapons available will be used. To understand the chronology, how we got to this point, one has to go back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, where we answered to this great historic chance, we as a LaRouche movement, with the idea to create an international peace order for the 21st century with our proposal of the Eurasian land bridge. This was the idea to integrate the entire Eurasian continent through development corridors, which was our proposal for a peace order. It was one of these absolutely rare historic chances, and I called it at the time a star hour of history. But at that point, the Anglo-American neocons adopted the so-called Wolfowitz doctrine of the Project for a New American Century, PNAC, which defined it as the mission of the United States to secure its role as the only remaining superpower, which had to have enough military power to prevent any nation or group of nations to ever challenge the supremacy of the United States, and naturally the British, ever again. The unipolar world forever. The Wolfowitz doctrine, or one can say Wolfowitz-Cheney doctrine, was the real reason why the promise by US Secretary of State James Baker III to Gorbachev that NATO would not move, quote, 1 inch to the east was not kept, but instead it moved more than 1,000 kilometers closer to the Russian border. And it was also the basis for the shock therapy against the Russian economy in the 90s during the Yeltsin government, which had the explicit aim to destroy the physical economy of Russia, and which is still the basis for the so-called German Foreign Minister Baerbock, when she keeps repeating that the purpose of sending ever more heavy weapons to Ukraine is to, quote, ruin Russia. In the meantime, there's open talk about the destruction of Russia, or as the former White House National Security Advisor John Bolton is saying about Putin, that he is a legitimate military target who is on our target list at this point, meaning he wants him assassinated. To threaten the destruction of a country, and Putin said very clearly the aim is to cut Russia into 3, 4, or more states, to threaten the assassination of the head of state, to have the de facto participation of US and NATO troops in the fighting in Ukraine, provide cyber intelligence to the Ukrainian military, train Ukrainian troops in the US military bases in Germany. All of that means we are already in a war between NATO and Russia. Russian red lines have already been crossed, and we are dangerously close to the point where Russia perceives that its territorial existence is threatened, which according to its military doctrine is the point it will use nuclear weapons. So it's not Putin threatening to use nuclear weapons, it's NATO driving Russia to the point where it either gives itself up as a nation or goes to war as self-defense. So that's where we are at. Why is this moment so extremely dangerous? It is not just the economic rise of China and the fact that more than 120 nations cooperating with the Belt and Road Initiative are about to bypass the political and economic and military power of the US and Great Britain, which the Wolfowitz doctrine says can't be permitted. But even more fundamental is the fact that the neoliberal model of the transatlantic world is in a systemic breakdown. We are exactly at the point which was forecast by Lyndon LaRouche, my late husband, more than 50 years ago, when Nixon ended the Bretton Woods system by moving from fixed to floating exchange rates, and in this way opening the floodgates to the unbridled free trade system of profit maximization of monetary gains at the expense of the physical economy and the living standard of the majority of the populations. We are now at the end of that road, which had many steps, such as the step-by-step deregulation of the financial markets, outsourcing of production into cheap labor markets, just-in-time production, shareholder value society, derivative speculation, etc., etc. When that system had a systemic crisis in 2007, 2008, rather than correcting the root of the problem, monetary gains at the expense of production, the central banks resorted to quantitative easing, reckless money printing as if there was no tomorrow. Now, what is happening is exactly what happened in Weimar Germany in 1923. After several years of many trillions of dollars of money printing, suddenly, within a few months, there is a hyperinflationary explosion. Now, the central banks are between a rock and a hard place. If they want to curb a galloping inflation by quantitative tightening, then they face a collapse of the over-indebted firms and the triggering of a crisis in the emerging markets. This is why the Bank of England is breathlessly vacillating between QE, QT, and then QE again. And a ridiculous, evil Liz Truss breathlessly vacillating between taxes down, taxes up. They are faced with the collapse of the bond market. The only difference to Germany in 1923 is that this time The hyperinflation is not in one country, but in all countries connected to the dollar as a world currency. We are now at the point forecasted by LaRouche in 1971 that the continuation of on the monetarist road would necessarily lead to a new depression, a new fascism, and a new world war, unless one would establish a completely different economic world order. The majority of the world population is doing exactly that. The BRICS, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is most of the countries of the Eastern Eurasian continent, ASEAN, the Asian countries, KICA, the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures, which is right now meeting in Astana, and many other countries of the global south are very advanced in constructing a new international currency and a new economic system, which is based on completely different principles than the neoliberal system, namely on the need to overcome poverty for everybody in the developing countries, increase the living standard of the population, put the common good first, and cooperate among sovereign states for the mutual benefit. And the so-called economists of the West, who are all completely and utterly discredited as ferociously incompetent, better reflect on what the best Russian economist, Sergei Glaziev, said, that we would not be in this crisis if people would have listened to Lyndon LaRouche. Now I come to the essence of what the international youth movement must be all about. You, the representatives of the youth today and of all future generations to come, must make a solemn commitment to end a condition of this world where the majority of mankind, 5 or 6 billion people, are deprived of their full potential as human beings, simply because they lack enough food, clean water, decent housing, universal education, and a modern health system, just so that a class of parasitical billionaires and millionaires can enjoy their privileges. This is what the LaRouche movement has been about from the very beginning, to overcome the poverty and underdevelopment of the countries of the global south as a morally unacceptable relict and continuation of colonialism in new clothes. When Lyndon LaRouche was serving in the Burma, China, India theater at the end of the Second World War, he witnessed the brutish behavior of the British in the winter and spring in 1946 in the riots in Calcutta, where he saw the British Empire in action. And he never stopped to hate the imperial suppression of the developing sector and never changed his commitment to work to replace the evil system of colonialism with a just new world economic order. And I joined his nascent organization after a trip I made in 1971 on a freighter, which took me to China in the middle of the Cultural Revolution and short stopovers in some African and Asian countries. When you travel with a cargo ship, you get a realistic view of the living condition of the people. You see the unnecessary poverty, which could be overcome so easily with Western technologies if the political will to do so existed. And that trip has shaped my life ever since. I came back from it with the deep conviction that this system of underdevelopment through no fault of their own, in which the developing countries find themselves up to the present day, had to be changed. When I investigated after return all the political organizations in Berlin, I found that LaRouche was the only one who talked about the need to build up infrastructure, agriculture, industry, education, health systems, and so forth in the so-called third world. Our movement has worked on that perspective for the last half century. We worked out development plans for Africa, Latin America, Asia. We worked with Indira Gandhi on a 40-year development plan for India, with President López Portillo of Mexico on a Latin American infrastructure plan, which was called Operation Juarez. And we extended the original plan of the Eurasian land bridge and all the other developing plans we had written into the concept of the new Silk Road becomes the world land bridge, which has now begun to be implemented by China with the Belt and Road Initiative and the Global Development Initiative, as Sergei Glaziev wrote in his powerful tribute to the 100th birthday commemoration of Lyndon LaRouche. The most important aspect of the world revolution I mentioned is the fact that there is a renaissance of the non-alignment movement occurring, which has expressed itself, among other things, in the unwillingness of many countries of the global south to choose sides between the US and Russia and China, and to be pulled into a geopolitical confrontation, which could only end up in a nuclear war. The spirit of Bandung, of that determination of the African and Asian countries of the conference in 1955 in Bandung to end colonialism in all of its forms, and today, which exists today in the forms of the shackles of a rigged monetary system, which suppresses the development of the so-called development sector, that spirit has come back to live in a powerful way. It is the idea of non-violence of Mahatma Gandhi, which defeated the British Empire and which also inspired the civil rights movement of Martin Luther King, which we need today to defeat the danger of thermonuclear extinction. We need a completely new paradigm in the way we think about humanity, not as the interest of one nation or a group of nations against the other, but as the one humanity first. You need to adopt the thinking of the coincidence of opposites of Nicolaus of Cues, that the one has a higher power than the many, which is the same thinking as that of, say, Yuan Pei, the first education minister of education of the Republic of China and the president of the Beijing University, who had the vision of a great community of the whole world, which in Chinese is called Datong Shishe, which is clearly reminiscent of Xi Jinping's shared community of the one future of mankind. And it's the same idea which Friedrich List had about the continuous perfection and integration of all infrastructure and communication systems that would create the precondition for the permanent progress in all areas of knowledge, in science and art, and allow human beings to exchange ideas and unfold all their talents. This infrastructural integration would eventually lead to the unification of all nations into the one humanity, as he called it, Republic of the Planet, based on the economy of mankind. The same idea was naturally expressed by Friedrich Schiller, who made emphatically the argument that there is no contradiction between a world citizen and a patriot, provided that the interest of the nation is in cohesion with that of humanity as a whole. Obviously, the most elevated artistic celebration of that concept is in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the composition of Schiller's Ode to Joy, where the chorus sings, "All men become brethren. Alle Menschen werden Brüder." This is not a utopia to think in terms of the one humanity first. It will be the precondition to overcome the most dangerous crisis in the history of mankind. So let us create an international movement of world citizens, where you, the young people from all over the world, are taking the lead to be the ambassadors of this vision of a world which will be truly human. And since many of you are familiar with the ideas of somebody born in the oldest city of Germany, Trier, let me suggest a slight variation of this idea, since I'm also born in Trier. And let us say world citizens of all countries unite to stop World War III and create a better world. Thank you.
Thank you, Helga. Thank you, everyone who's here. It's wonderful to see everyone together here. We have still more people coming in. I want people to know that watching online, we have people from many, many different countries. We had hundreds of registrations come in for the live stream from practically, in fact, every continent. And this is a very hopeful opportunity for a forum of dialogue between people of different backgrounds, different orientations, but all committed to this common goal. And so in that spirit, I would like to, I have a great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Jackson Hinkle.
What's up, everybody? How we doing? Good morning. Good morning. It's early for me. I'm on California time, so bear with me here. No, but it's actually good to be here. Manhattan is beautiful. I don't know how I can go back to LA after being here. Like, in LA, there's just like shit on the streets everywhere. I don't see that many homeless people here. It's actually pretty great. All right. Well, fifth block of Madison Avenue isn't that bad. We'll say that. But anyways, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about something else. And it's actually what I think is probably the most important story today that no one is talking about. And for those of you who don't know me, I have a YouTube show. It's called The Dive with Jackson Hinkle. And I started it a couple of years ago, maybe like 3 years ago. And it was after I'd gotten into politics. I'd run for city council in my hometown of San Clemente, California, in Orange County. And I got into politics initially through being interested in environmental issues, which is kind of interesting that I find myself here now. But when we think of like environmental issues, at least when I thought of environmental issues when I was growing up, I always thought of it in the scope and of like, well, I was a surfer. I've always been a surfer. So let's get like trash out of the oceans. Let's fix that. I live in Los Angeles now, like I said, so let's get the trash off the streets. It's terrible there, right? And I think that most people can agree that's like an admirable cause, whatever. We want to live in a clean society, clean cities, all that stuff. But this was always done under the guise of, having a better place to live, higher standard of living, cleaner cities, all this stuff. And now environmentalism, at least the environmentalism that's parroted by the likes of, Greta Thunberg or those climate activists yesterday that threw the tomato soup on the Van Gogh painting. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was crazy. But the environmentalism touted by those people today, it doesn't champion a higher standard of living. It doesn't champion, more prosperity, industrialization, growth, any of these sorts of things. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's degrowth, it's depopulation, and it's a Malthusian worldview that tries to eliminate human life. It's very scary what they're doing right now. And we actually have a manifestation of it that's underway in Europe. And Helga discussed that a little bit in the keynotes address that you just listened to. That's great. I hate following great speakers, but I'm going to try my best. Right now, the environmentalists are telling us that food is poison and poison is food. That's essentially what they're saying. They're saying that we shouldn't look at any of the benefits of high yield energy, right? Of oil, fossil fuels, fracking, coal, any of these sorts of things, and we should only look at the negatives. That's dangerous for a lot of reasons. All right, if we were to look at modern medicine and only look at the negatives of modern medicine, we'd probably all be dead. You have to look at the positives, and with fossil fuels, there are many to look at. Fossil fuels are the reasons why we're here today. Fossil fuels are the reason why we have the country that we have. And fossil fuels, the lack thereof, however, are the reason why so many people all across the world are suffering so greatly. All right. There are 1.2 billion people all across the world today who have no energy, none whatsoever. There's another 3 billion that rely on wood and dung to heat their homes. And as this energy crisis in Europe hits, there's going to be more people who rely on wood and dung to probably heat their homes. There's another 3 billion people, or that same 3 billion people rely on just a refrigerator's worth of energy to live their lives each and every day. So the refrigerator that you have in your kitchen, they rely on just that amount of energy every single day to live their lives. It's scary to think about that, right? But it also highlights a real issue, that being that we don't have enough energy that we're producing today. A lot of people in the environmental movement will tell you that, oh, we have too much energy and we need to focus on reducing output and reducing growth. If you look at the facts that I just listed, the fact that, again, 1.2 billion people have no energy whatsoever, well, that's a lie. We actually need a lot more energy if we want to lift people out of poverty, okay? We need a lot more energy if we want to address the real crises surrounding infant mortality, low standard of livings, low life expectancies, all that's plaguing so many people across the planet today. And again, this isn't being done by these people's own decision. It's being done maliciously. The fact that we don't have energy, the fact that we don't have enough production, the fact that we don't have enough resources for people all across the world, it's being done maliciously by globalists, okay? Now, globalism, for those of you who don't know, is a religion of sorts. Atheism, I think, is probably at an all-time high across the globe right now, but there's a lot of atheists who actually worship globalism. It's like their own religion. Ursula von der Leyen, chief among them, she's head of the European Commission. I love her. She's great. You guys heard about Baerbock and Habeck in Germany. These are the sorts of figures that truly embody what globalism is. Globalist imperialism is an effort by these global elites to press their worldview upon the masses, whether it's their economic worldview, whether it's their atheist worldview, whether it's their worldview surrounding energy and the green fascist push, whether it's woke ideology, whatever it is, they're pushing that ideology on the masses. And in the EU, it's hitting pretty hard. Okay, in the EU, that's where we're probably seeing it the most. And it just shows the failures of globalism, of green fascism in particular. And the Eurozone is an interesting experiment. It's a failure. We know that by now. But it was an interesting experiment. What we're seeing unfold in the Eurozone right now is pretty incredible. For the past several decades, led by Germany, of course, and people like Ursula von der Leyen, the Eurozone's invested hundreds of billions of dollars into green energy. Okay, hundreds of billions of dollars into green energy. With stats like that, you'd think that green energy makes up like 50% of their entire energy portfolio, right? But globally, that's not the case. Globally, solar and wind only make up about 2 to 3% of the entire world's energy portfolio. Fossil fuels are still the largest. 80% of the world runs off of fossil fuels, and that number is increasing. It's still growing. Again, as the 1.2 billion people without power seek power, they seek high yield power that's cheap, and that is fossil fuels. Okay, but the Eurozone is failing, not just for this reason, not just because they pursue green energy, not just because they have it forced upon them, but because it's mandated by the globalists, people like Ursula von der Leyen, people like Klaus Schwab, people at the World Economic Forum, right? They mandate this because at the end of the day, again, as we started our conversation here, their professed worldview as globalists is a Malthusian worldview of degrowth and depopulation. It sounds a little bit tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist of me to say that, but you can go look at people such as Henry Kissinger, who in US government documents stated their professed goals of depopulation and degrowth, particularly in developing parts of the world. Not just that, they want to target individuals, families, communities that have revolutionaries like all of you here today. All right, that's who they want to try and eliminate from humanity. They want humanity to be a boiling pot of the world's, richest 1 billion people who all think that men can get pregnant and that, like these sorts of crazy ideas. It's just insane. But Europe's mandate of green energy that they're trying to push on all these, EU member states is failing right now. Poetically almost, this bloc has sanctioned themselves into a crisis the likes of which we've never seen before. And this is the story that I reflected on at the start of this speech that I think is the most important story that no one's talking about. I had a family event last week, and it was my sister's wedding. And at that event, I saw many relatives I haven't seen in a long time. Few of them were going to Europe this winter. They're telling me, "Oh, Jackson, we're going to Paris this winter. We're going to, we're going to Germany. We're going to the UK this winter." And I looked at them and I was like, "Why? Why would you, out of every winter that you could ever choose, you're going to choose this winter to go to Europe? Like, you understand what you're getting yourself into here?" And they're like, "What do you mean? It's great. I mean, maybe Los Angeles is a little bit warmer for you, but France is great. The UK is great. What do you mean?" I'm like, "No, the energy crisis. Like, they're not going to have energy this winter." And they just looked at me like I was insane. But we're not insane. Probably most of you know what's happening right now. The West has manufactured an energy crisis in Europe, and it's a big one. It's not an energy crisis the likes of which we've ever experienced here, where you just have like higher gas prices, where you pay a bit more on your monthly energy rates. It's an energy crisis which looks like grandma and grandpa having to go and chop down some wood in the forest and make sure that they don't die this winter. That's what it looks like. And it's so funny because it's sad because, they told us for the past 2 years, the politicians, the mainstream media, they wouldn't shut up about how much they care about saving grandma and grandpa's lives throughout COVID. We need to secure public health. We need to make sure that everyone stays alive. We need to look out for our communities. But then as soon as, Putin decides that he wants to protect Ukrainians in the Donbass, then all that goes out the window, and we need to sanction Russia into oblivion, and we need to manufacture this energy crisis in Europe to pursue our globalist agenda. Now, when it comes to Europe, what this is going to look like this winter is them probably running out of energy, at least in France, at least in Germany, and at least in the UK. That's where it's going to be really bad. Energy prices in some of these areas and some of these regions of Germany, the UK, and France are already skyrocketing to 500% year-on-year increases. Governments are coming in right now and saying that they're going to protect the people by covering like half of the cost increases on utilities. People are going to suffer. People are going to die. People aren't going to have enough money to pay for basic living expenses. And that's a shame. It's a problem. But the problem isn't going to end there. The problem is going to be much worse next winter and the next winter because it's cyclical. This isn't a problem that just solves itself. Olaf Scholz isn't just going to create new LNG terminals over the next 2 months and the problem will go away. This is a problem that they've created by design. Okay, it's a problem that is going to last many years, and the economic crisis that's going to fall out from this will be massive. Okay, it's going to cause mass human suffering. And what is fascism at the end of the day? What's the common denominator with fascism? It's war and power, control of the masses. When they can control the masses because the masses don't have power, the masses are desperate, the masses don't have a livelihood to sustain themselves, the masses are in debt, that makes it much easier to treat all of you like lab rats, all right? It makes it much easier to remove your free will. It makes it much easier for people like Ursula von der Leyen and Olaf Scholz to tell you how it is and force you into accepting whatever cultural or socioeconomic policies that they put forward. Many refer to this as like the Great Reset agenda, okay? And when people talk about the Great Reset agenda, they oftentimes highlight the verbiage used by people at the World Economic Forum that declares that the masses are going to be ruled and governed by, they're going to own nothing and be happy, essentially. That's what they tell us at the World Economic Forum. Now, what that means is loaded. I mean, if you talk to average MAGA supporters in the United States, when they hear the term "own nothing and be happy," they think that Klaus Schwab is a follower of Lenin and he's going to remove all private property. Now, that's not the case, of course. You all know that. What it means, though, is what we just discussed. They're going to govern all of you by debt. Why do you think they're going after the farmers all across Europe right now? They're telling these farmers, who they've told these farmers for years, increase your cattle production, increase your livestock production, okay? What that means for the farmers is they have to buy more fixed assets every year to produce more and more for the mandates that are put forward by the governments. And then this year, they go back to all those Dutch farmers and they tell them, well, we have a nitrogen issue and you actually have to cut your nitrogen production by half. Well, that leaves all these farmers with fixed assets that they still have to pay off year on year, but they can't do so because of the fact that they are in debt and they can't produce anything to make money. So you can look at all these various examples of how they are absolutely screwing us over in an attempt to govern us further by debt. But understand that we all here are going to have to fight back against that. We're going to have to challenge it. I think that we're better equipped than those in Europe and the UK because we're not cucks to the liberal establishment. I mean, it's just insane to look at what Europe is accepting and believing right now. I mean, they literally think that like the Azov battalion is like, Superman and his, band of heroes that's going to save the world. But we are equipped. We are equipped, and there's people fighting back all across the world right now. And to finish off here, my prediction is that when this winter hits, the ramifications of these policies begin to impact average people across Europe, Germany, France, the UK in particular, Sweden probably as well. People are going to riot in the streets. People are going to lose their minds. People are going to demand answers, of course, from their politicians at the start. That's already happening. There's massive protests all throughout Europe, tens of thousands of people that are getting on the streets and saying, freeze the energy prices, don't freeze us this winter. The politicians won't respond. We know that's already happening. And they're going to respond in kind with state-sanctioned violence. This is going to create a massive dilemma for the global community. I have no idea how it's going to unfold. I don't know if any of us do. But all I've got to say is stay vigilant. Continue to educate your peers about what's going on in the world, because clearly most of them don't know, like my relatives at the wedding last week who thought it would be a good time to go and visit Europe this winter. But stay vigilant, educate your peers, and I believe at the end of the day, we will overcome this for the reasons that Helga just listed in that keynote address. The SCO is rising, BRICS is rising. They will be developing new global reserve currencies. Iran and Russia are working to replace OPEC Plus, and OPEC Plus really isn't all that much of an ally to the West anymore, as we saw this past week, decreasing oil production by 2 million barrels per day, just to shove it to Biden. So I'm hopeful. I don't know about you guys. I'm hopeful. And I think that together, we will rise above the globalists. Thank you so much.
I believe that would be 2036, the first time it could work. So thank you very much for that, Jackson. Thank you very much for that. And it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, my very good friend, Jason Ross, who is the Executive Director of the LaRouche Organization. Please give him a round of applause.
All right, thank you. Let's double check that this works first. Okay. Great, okay, good. All right, so thank you, Daniel. Yes, gotta be closer. All right. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, David. I am super happy to be here with this incredible group of speakers, this wonderful crowd here. My topic is LaRouche and leadership. The world demands from us leadership that can create a platform for the future, a thought through, developed program for the future. It demands of us a method of thinking, an expression of a method of thinking that's able to develop a thought through program for the future, and an ability to collaborate to make that a reality. So we have to be able to express to people what's going on, certainly. We have to be able to share with them what will be going on, what we want that future to look like, and give them a real vision for it. So I'd like to talk about the LaRouche movement. If we take a look over the years at the programs for the industrialization of Africa, this is a program from several decades ago. This is a report that we put out just a few years ago that I co-authored on extending the new Silk Road to Southwest Asia and Africa. We've had programs, as Helga had mentioned, Operation Juarez, a program for Latin America. Here's President Lopez Portillo speaking at the UN and meeting with Helga Sepp-LaRouche in Mexico City. We have had, LaRouche has had a long-standing relationship with Indian leaders, including Indira Gandhi, and including in 2001, his meeting with President Narayanan in India. Programs for Thailand for developing a canal through the Kra, to develop a Kra canal. And we've had the economic ideas able to make this a reality. The International Development Bank proposal, what would be able to replace the failure of those Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, the IMF. They're not doing what Roosevelt would have wanted them to do. So LaRouche wrote an alternative, an International Development Bank. Here's Fred Wills, the Foreign Minister of Guyana, discussing this at the United Nations General Assembly. The LaRouche movement has worked with leading scientists from around the world on the most important scientific breakthroughs necessary to create the next chapters in the book of human history, leading among those nuclear fusion. Here's LaRouche with leading scientists. After the government shut down that magazine, we created 21st Century Science and Technology to discuss world issues like defending the planet from asteroids, developing a nuclear NWAPA to address continental water issues from a continental basis, taking water from where it isn't needed, bringing it to where it is, like California. This is what we've done. The Strategic Defense Initiative, as expressed by Ronald Reagan in 1983, this was a LaRouche vision to use new technologies, energy, particle beams, to be able to build a global defense system against nuclear missiles, to work with the Soviet Union for a defense against the devastation of nuclear war, to bring down that threat and to have great economic growth along the way. He worked with great musicians. Here's Norbert Breinien, the head of the Amadeus String Quartet. With singers in Italy, we see people working with LaRouche on a proposal to go back to the tuning of Giuseppe Verdi, who was not only a great composer, he was a senator in Italy. One of his bills to set the tuning at the right level for the human voice to work its best. And in the more recent period, the World Land Bridge, coming out of a Eurasian land bridge proposal. Lyndon LaRouche, Helga LaRouche saw the opportunity that came with the end of the Soviet Union, with the potential for ending that Iron Curtain divide, for collaborating across these barriers. The ideas were expressed directly. Here's Lyndon LaRouche in Russia, giving an economics lecture on the left. He's speaking at the right at an economics meeting of the State Duma, where he was, I believe for this one, invited by Sergei Laziev. Here's Helga Sepp-LaRouche at the eastern terminal of the Eurasian land bridge, the idea that she had done so much to champion. And here is from 1997, our report, the Eurasian land bridge, the new Silk Road, 1997. So you can imagine how happy we are with the 2013 announcement by Xi Jinping in Kazakhstan of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is, it goes with this. So in thinking through the present crisis, the showdown between a dying system of Anglo-American finance from the City of London and Wall Street, but not just Wall Street, the City of London and Wall Street, the British Empire. There's a showdown between that dying system and that nascent system that Daniel described in the beginning, that we see being led and moved forward by Russia, by China, by India. The escalation of the conflict between the two, if not stopped, If the causes of that conflict are not addressed, removed, and replaced, we will have a nuclear war and we're going to die. That's the threat that we face today. So something's clearly gone terribly wrong. And I want to address one aspect of leadership in this, which is how you come to conclusions. So I'd like to ask a question, which is, do you have a right to your opinion? Do you have a right to your opinion? This is not the same as do you have a right to express an opinion, which we see a lot with social media and other censorship today, but do you have a right to have an opinion? So, you know, what sort of opinion? Pizza toppings, TV shows, politics? Sure, we have opinions. And because of elections, we're asked to weigh in with our opinions on an election every few years. And that makes a lot of people think that they have some reason to even hold a political opinion, that they're competent to have one because they're asked about it all the time. But let me ask, do people have strong opinions on the physics or existence of dark matter? I mean, is that something that everybody thinks they know about and weigh in on Twitter? No. Does everybody think they know the best way to raise an alligator, or how to use p-scores and statistics, how to repair a jet engine? No, people don't think they know anything about that. How about the effectiveness or dangers of vaccines? How many people have opinions on this who maybe don't have any business coming to strong conclusions on these matters? Maybe you do. How about climate change? Do middle schoolers, I mean, what did we know about science in middle school? Hell, what do we know about science now? But do middle schoolers, do they actually know anything about how the whole earth is changing based on carbon dioxide? They can't know that. It's not possible. They'd have no basis for even knowing that. So why do we praise children for expressing views that they couldn't possibly know? What kind of message is that sharing to young people? Go out and have a strong opinion about something that we know you couldn't actually know anything about. Is knowing important? How about Russian propaganda? How many people say, oh, this has all the telltale signs of Russian propaganda, as though they've been studying it for decades, and as though it's even true, right? Talk about misinformation. This comes right out of the Russian playbook. What Russian playbook? What else is in this Russian playbook? They don't mention it. They just make these claims. So all around us, we're propagandized to take false positions, but really, and I think more importantly, to think in a way, to draw conclusions in a way that takes away from us the process of reaching a reasoned conclusion. Some form of popular opinion or of group identity that replaces objective truth and the process of discovery. Fitting in with the group, maybe a good group, becomes a substitute for developing a real method to make sure you know what you're talking about. So we need to use our very precious mental energy and time to develop our ability to come to useful conclusions, to universal principles that work. So let me talk about two ways that people avoid this. Just two examples of how people avoid leadership. One, the belief that a mass grouping of people, workers, as characterized by some scheme, will seize the reins of power and make good decisions. What decisions will these workers, however we define that, what will they make? Will they be good decisions? It's hard to do worse than what we're doing right now. I'll give you that. But do you actually know how economics works by virtue of having a productive job? I'm sure you have some insight, but people can be wrong, right? A second way that people avoid leadership, they say the British free trade system, the free market idea, this is the best way for progress. If everybody tries to make money on their own, this causes growth, and that's really all there is to it. The government shouldn't pick winners and losers. What are they saying? I don't know what to do, and I refuse to be accountable for figuring it out. Let the market do it. So in both of these cases, the workers, the free market, that decision-making process, leadership is being fobbed off on someone or something else. You've got to take that leadership yourself. So you have to make choices when you propose a policy. You must pick priorities. The World Land Bridge, it's a policy, it's a proposal. It's the result. It's the expression of a way of developing policy. How do you think through what that future is going to be? What are the principles of economics? So in thinking through this, the first step is to forget about money. Forget about finance. Put that to the side. That's not economics. You can't measure wealth in terms of money, of dollars, of any scalar quantitative value in that sense. Start instead with physics, physical economy. In a certain area of land, per square kilometer, or acre, or what have you, how many people can you support with your current level of technology, with your current level of culture? How much land would be required for a hunter-gatherer society? How much space do you need to go around looking for some berries or whatever? It's a lot of space. How much land is required per person to support an agricultural society, where instead of hoping that you find something to eat, you plant seeds and you know exactly where you're going to find the plants that grow up? How much more efficient is that? How have we changed the carrying capacity of the earth, the human carrying capacity, by changing our relationship to nature? Add in irrigation. How have you changed that potential population? Add in metallurgy, the Bronze Age. We're able to make metal tools. How has that transformed the physical economic wealth? The steam engine, which we never could have had without the Iron Age and precision. How does that transform the potential productive powers of labor? How does that improve the potential living standards of the people of this planet? When you can take rocks out of the ground, coal, and turn them into motion. I mean, that's almost like magic if you go back and think about it. How did that transform society? How many dollars was that discovery worth, huh? It's a stupid question. You can't answer it that way. So by expanding our repertoire of scientific knowledge, we increase the potential relative population density, the number of people that could be supported. And as Lyndon LaRouche put it, this is the rough measure of the superiority of one level of culture over another. This is the measure of economic progress. The superiority of one level of culture over another. Can a culture be superior to another? Is this a way of measuring it? He said only societies whose cultures commit them to successful technological progress as a policy of practice are qualified to survive and to prosper. Look at the cover of his 1983 book. There are no limits to growth. So the rich heritage that should be ours of the amazing discoveries that brought us to this point, the inside view of the history of how did we figure all of these things out, that's not provided to us. That's hidden from us. We don't do that in school, do we? You know, what is the basis of a scientific advance? What is the basis of discovery? Will machine learning replace us? Will it be creative in discovering new universal physical principles? Two examples. Some people today think the Earth is flat. It isn't. But did we know that before satellites? How did we know that? How was it that in Egypt, 2,200 years ago, Eratosthenes was able not just to say the Earth is round, but to measure how big it is? 2,200 years ago, this was figured out. You can do this yourself by connecting with Zoom with another classroom if you have some geographical distance. Did anybody do that? Did anybody in school measure how big the Earth is? Why not? It's a fun thing to do. You get to be in the mind of someone from Egypt 2,000 years ago who measured the biggest thing around. Why don't we do that? Do we get to re-experience that joy of discovery? So another example. You've probably heard a rumor about a triangle like this, that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is a pervasive rumor in our math classes. I'm not saying it's wrong, but do you know that it's right? How many teachers go through how this was figured out, getting your hands dirty, looking at triangles, working with areas, and then saying, oh, this isn't the start of a lesson. This is the end of it. We figured this out. How long could that take? A day or two? So in terms of why this is left out, it's not because I'm saying that triangles don't work that way. The point is, we don't know everything. We've got more discoveries to make. So why is that discovery process left out in education? We spend how long in school? How many hours, how many days, weeks, months, years did you spend in school? And how much of it was getting to recreate real discoveries from the past? Getting the sense that your mind could figure out, just like those people had, a new idea. Getting the sense that you and your fellow classmates all had in common that fact that you were made in the image of God and able to understand with ideas in the mind, to have concepts that have a power in the physical world. How much does an idea weigh? How does it taste? How much mass does it have? Stupid questions. But these ideas, a thought that we have, unlike a thought that a dog has if they have dogs, if they have thoughts, our ideas are able to transform how many people can live on this planet, are able to create states of nature that don't exist otherwise. Aluminum metal, you don't find that on Earth. We make it, as just one example. So that needs to be the focus of society, certainly of education, but that's got to be the basis of a political movement too. Both to get a sense of the inside track of where economic growth comes from, because it comes from those kinds of thoughts, and a sense of what do we need to do socially? What are we as people together? So let me bring these thoughts together and conclude. Lyndon LaRouche insisted on a movement based in education, in which the movement's members experience with that process of discovery, science, music, art, that gave necessary insight into the foundation of economics, into what we all have in common as human beings, an idea affirmatively of the universality of human beings. We hear a lot about our differences today. What actually do we have in common as human beings? The birth of the Golden Renaissance in the 15th century, this came through thinkers who saw each man and woman as made in the image of God, the Creator. This was their view. Whatever your opinions on this might be, this is what the people thought who created the Renaissance. That our minds, as like a miracle, are able to develop concepts that have power in that world outside of us. And how many of those principles do we get to experience? That's something we need to change. So the universe needs more people to experience the joy of learning, the joy of discovery, more people to figure out how we're going to go to Mars, more people to cure cancer and other diseases, more people to develop nuclear fusion, more people to work on matter, antimatter, more people to make breakthroughs in biology that are going to transform our lives, our health, crops, things like this. We need more people. The World Land Bridge, it's more than rail lines. It's not a way of getting from point A to point B. It's more than development corridors, where you see the availability of transport across the region as transforming the economic potential of that entire area, because now you can bring in electricity, water with it. You've transformed the potential of what you can do in those areas by being connected. It's more than that. It's more than a policy. The World Land Bridge is an expression of a vision of the human species, a real developed idea of the human species. So today, we see the leaderships of China and Russia implementing a new world system, very much in keeping with what the LaRouches have put forward for decades. The LaRouche movement has put forward for decades. We see India moving in this direction. We see nations in Africa, Latin America, the global South, so-called, not going along with what they're told by the Anglo-American elite. We see a new world coming into being. And whether we succeed in having such a world versus dying in a nuclear holocaust, this is a decision that may be something for the matter of days and weeks ahead of us, not months or years. So your leadership is demanded today. Your future leadership is demanded today. What will you become capable of doing? I'm no Martin Luther King, you might say. Was Martin Luther King? What did he do to make himself capable of the challenges that he took on? What are you willing to take on to make yourself that leader for the future? I think that's the question we should think through. And I would encourage everybody to, in a specific way to move on this, to register for the classes that the LaRouche movement will be holding on these topics of economics, of science, of music. LaRouche.info/classes. The first series on economics will be starting soon. We need to develop in our minds a real inside track of what that uniquely human capability is, so that we can make the policies and provide the leadership that the future demands of us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. You can open up your pamphlet and you'll see that registration link on this page. So I want to say hello again to the streaming audience. Make sure that you like the stream, you subscribe, you share this. And I would also like to propose that people who are watching, people who are here, please become a member of the Schiller Institute. Start sending in donations today. People who are watching, please make sure that we have the funds to be able to continue a process of conferences and organizing to keep this, keep this thing going and expand and grow all across the world. So with that in mind, we have a section here where we're going to play some videos that were contributions to the conference. These are from friends. These are from really wonderful people in other parts of the world. And we're going to begin with a contribution by Prince Mthombeni, who will also join us live for the Q&A. We're going to get to the Q&A probably around like 12:15, maybe 12:30. And I'm going to be taking some questions that come in from international viewers online. So if you have something you'd like to get in this morning, then from the in-person audience, please understand if we don't get to you, but we're going to do our very best to. So allow me to introduce the video contribution of the wonderful Prince Mthombeni. She is the founder of Africa for Nuclear, and she joins us from South Africa.
Program Director, fellow speakers, conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. Firstly, I'd like to convey my sincere gratitude to the Schiller Institute for inviting me to this conference and for giving me an opportunity to talk about what I advocate for, which is energy security. Today, my talk is titled, Locking Up the African Underdeveloped and Developing Nations into Poverty Using the Green Energy Approach. I would like to highlight the importance of this conference and the issue of defeating the green fascism, especially in the context of Africa and the present global energy crisis. At the 26th Conference of the Parties on Climate Change, famously known as COP26, which was held in Glasgow, in United Kingdom last year in October, the President of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden, in his speech said the following: growing up as a young man in an area that was a heavy supplier of coal in Northeast Pennsylvania, I watched what happened when that industry collapsed and the impact it had on community. To avoid a sequel, I feel it is important to take care of people who are impacted and provide alternatives for them. He further said, local governments, labor, civil societies, and communities should be engaged from the very start to make sure the benefits to the community are equitable and they are immediate, close quote. In the context of this quote, President Biden was contrasting choices we have to make between building more coal power plants versus building solar and wind farms in the next 30 years to year 2050 net zero scenario. According to President Biden, the sustainable path to net zero emissions by 2050 is based on his recognition front and center of the Build Back Better World initiative that he announced in June 2021, along with G7 partners. Over and above Build Back Better World initiative, Mr. Biden alluded to the fact that the G7 partners speak of Clean Green Initiative of Great Britain, the Global Gateway, as well as Clean Green Initiatives of Europe, in order to realize the green economy, which to many of us is nothing else but green fascism. With all of this big talk, the real challenge is that only South Africa seems to be a target of these initiatives, to a point that US, UK, France, Germany, and the European Union have pledged $8.5 billion to encourage South Africa to decommission its coal power plants and implement the green energy economy. And the justification for this is South Africa is the largest emitter in Africa due to its large reliance on coal power stations. Notably, the biggest emitters, which are US itself, China and India, are not interested to go into these types of green pledges of the G7 nations at the expense of their economies. What I find good with this $8.5 billion pledge by US and its G7 partners is that it says it has to be embraced by 4 main stakeholders, which are government, labor unions, civil societies, and communities where these coal plants are located. That means the $8.5 billion green pledge will only be accepted by South Africa if all 4 parties do not strongly object to the closure of these affected coal power stations. And therefore, I urge Mr. Biden and G7 partners to make sure that this $8.5 billion pledge is agreed to and signed for by labor, civil societies, and communities that will be impacted. To quote President Biden one more time, he said, "By closing South Africa's coal plants ahead of schedule and investing in clean power alternatives for the people of South Africa and supporting an equitable and inclusive transition in South Africa's coal sector, we are following through on the pledge that G7 partners made in Cornwall to accelerate the transition away from coal in developing countries." Close quote. All of this is unfair to the developing and underdeveloped African countries because the US and its G7 partners did not sign the COP26 pledge to stop burning coal. Instead, they asked to be allowed to burn coal until 2030 and beyond. This shows that US and its G7 partners are asking African countries to do what they are not prepared to do in the name of green economy. Over and above US asking to be allowed to burn coal until 2030 and beyond, this year, between August and September, Germany has asked to be allowed to burn fossil fuels up until 2038. Furthermore, it was reported that between January and May 2022, this year, over 3 million tons of coal have been shipped from South Africa to European countries, including Germany. This is after Russia cut their natural gas export. I'm asking myself this: what is the difference between European countries who, when they need fossil fuels, they can just go for it because it is necessary for the energy security of their people? Yet Africans dare not put their people's interests first, as they continue to be told that the only solution for them is wind and solar renewables energy. This begs the question of, are underdeveloped and developing countries the only ones compelled to risk their energy security? Ladies and gentlemen, developed countries can no longer exempt themselves from the responsibility of addressing climate change by throwing money at poor African countries. A money that comes in a form of loans, grants, and concessions that end up being a debt trap for African countries and their future generations. In summary, Program Director, the US and its G7 partners talk about closing coal and responsibly going for wind and solar renewables. And they talk about green initiatives to support the net zero emissions targets. We know that their green initiatives include new nuclear power and gas to power plants. To an extent that Europe recently voted for nuclear power and gas to power to be included in the green finance taxonomy. However, there is nowhere in Joe Biden and G7 partners' pledge to South Africa where they talk about new nuclear power and gas to power investments as part of green initiatives. So this is a clear ambush to South Africa, its people and its economy to be used as a guinea pig for hoping that the rest of the 55 African Union member states will follow suit. While this green ambush was happening at COP26 and is most likely to happen at COP27, South Africa owes a lot of gratitude to the Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, Ms. Barbara Creecy, who refused to sign the COP26 phasing out coal pledge. I hope she will remain resolute at COP27 again, because we know the US and its G7 partners are definitely not going to sign the phasing out coal pledge for at least until 2038. Therefore, South Africa must also be allowed a space to breathe and plan properly for the preparations to the 2050 net zero scenario. However, not all is lost, because there are some African countries that are not falling for this trap, like Egypt, which is currently building a $25 billion new nuclear power plant with Russia. Zambia, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and Ghana, who are all forging ahead to developing nuclear infrastructure programs, because they are aware that this green approach includes nuclear power and gas to power. Gas-rich countries like Mozambique, Tanzania, and Nigeria are seriously exploring opportunities for gas to power. These countries are demonstrating exemplary leadership, following up on the wise quote of the former president of Burkina Faso, the late Mr. Thomas Sankara, where he said, "He who feeds you controls you." Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would like to highlight this. At COP27, taking place in Egypt next month, which is November 2022, I hope the African nations I have mentioned remain resilient in adopting baseload power technologies like nuclear and gas, as well as the socio-economically sensible and responsible mix of wind and solar renewables energy. As the consequences, ramifications, and repercussions of an energy transition without just in it would be of pandemic devastation in many underdeveloped and developing African countries, locking them into poverty for generations to come. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Princey. Next, we will play a short video from someone who would have liked to have attended the conference, Billy Estime, and he is with Café Diplo. He's the founder of Café Diplo and president of ARCS Haiti.
Durant les dernières décennies, nous avons constaté une dérive totale au sein de la communauté haïtienne. Cette dérive est caractérisée par le manque total d'information et d'éducation civique des citoyens haïtiens, en particulier la jeunesse. Aucun citoyen engagé ne devrait rester indifférent. Pour remédier à cette situation, Carlin Saint-Louis et Billy Andres Estime ont décidé d'apporter leur contribution en mettant sur pied Café Diplo Haïti. Café Diplo Haïti est un laboratoire d'idées qui a pour objectif d'informer et de faciliter l'éducation civique de la jeunesse haïtienne en utilisant les réseaux sociaux qui de nos jours sont très sollicités. Nous avons une équipe dynamique qui travaille à la mise en place de diverses rubriques nous permettant d'atteindre nos objectifs. Le débat étudiant est l'une des plus appréciées. C'est un espace où les jeunes étudiants peuvent affronter leurs idées sur des problématiques nationales ou mondiales. Aujourd'hui, les crises, la famine, la pauvreté, l'insécurité ne respectent pas les frontières. Nous sommes tous conscients de cette réalité. L'égocentrisme politique est devenu plus dangereux que jamais car nous devons agir ensemble face à certains problèmes. C'est pourquoi nous ne nous intéressons pas uniquement aux problématiques nationales au sein de Café Diplo Haïti. Nous sommes convaincus que seuls des leaders avisés nous mèneront sur ce chemin de changement dont nous rêvons tous. Nous devons lutter ensemble contre les différences car nous sommes tous concernés. Les jeunes leaders d'aujourd'hui doivent privilégier la coopération et l'entraide internationale tout en laissant de côté leurs différences afin de lutter ensemble pour un monde meilleur et plus sûr. Joignez-vous à nous pour bâtir un demain meilleur. Nous sommes disponibles sur tous les réseaux sociaux. Abonnez-vous.
Billy and his team have been circulating the Schiller Institute proposal for the economic development of Haiti. Pardon me. And I know some people who were in the audience probably couldn't see the subtitles, but you will be able to watch it online easily. Next, we have a video from Xiu Huang, who is a postgraduate at the Guangdong Institute for International Strategies at Guangdong University of Foreign Studies. Please give a round of applause. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Huang Shexiu from China. It's a great honor to be invited to join you at the International Schiller Institute Conference. Today I'll be focusing on China-Africa cooperation and how Africa has transformed from once being considered as a hopeless continent to nowadays an aspiring Africa through her own hard work, and what role China plays in Africa's transformation and industrialization. So in 2013, the Chinese President Xi Jinping put forward the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. And in the following year, 2014, the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang paid a visit to 4 African countries, including Ethiopia and the headquarters of the African Union, putting forth the framework to upgrade China-Africa cooperation and pledged to build modern railways to connect all African capital cities. Thereafter, dramatic changes have taken place in Africa's economic development and infrastructure building. So now let's take a closer look at what's happening right now in Africa. So there are 3 major bottlenecks that are stopping Africa from growing prosperous. The first one is the lack of infrastructure. China and African countries have signed lots of infrastructure building projects. Some are still under construction, while some have been completed, like this one, Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway. It is a new standard gauge international railway that serves as the backbone of the new Ethiopia railway network. It has also been held as a lifeline program because it connects the landlocked Ethiopia with Djibouti. Djibouti is the main gateway for imports and exports for Ethiopia. This traffic makes up a staggering 90% of the throughput at Djibouti's ports. And the next railway line is in Kenya, linking Mombasa with the capital city, Nairobi. After it opened to traffic in 2017, it has shortened the traveling time between the 2 cities from 12 hours to just 4 hours. The list of these kind of projects goes on and on and on. So as the Chinese saying goes, if you want to get rich, you need to fix the road first. Be it railways and roads or highways and bridges, they are all essential projects to boost regional connectivity and integration in Africa. It is worth to mention that the Port Zhongdi Ombu coastal road in Gabon has put an end to its isolation to the outside world, as it could only be reached by air or sea previously. And the second major bottleneck is the shortage of skilled labor. As we know, talents are the backbone for a nation's development. China has been empowering Africa through education by launching a series of projects and programs in education, like the Luban workshops. They have been providing state-of-the-art vocational education in some specific fields, such as smart manufacturing, new energy technology, big data, artificial intelligence, etc. Luban Workshop is not just a bilateral education provider, but also involves two-way exchanges such as student exchange and mutual recognition of academic qualifications. Meanwhile, there are some scholarship programs like the CSC scholarship programs that provide full scholarship to qualified African students to study in China at some prestigious universities. At the same time, they have the freedom to choose their own major according to their own background. Some other projects like Future of Africa, Capacity Building Program, and China-aided project of rehabilitation and expansion of rural schools. All these projects and programs have empowered African people. Next, let's look at this graph. As we can see, from 2013 to 2015, the slope is much steeper than from 2006 to 2012, which means the popularity of Chinese education has been increasing among the African students. According to the UNESCO data, in 2014, China surpassed the US and the UK to become the top destination for African students to study overseas. So here we come to the third major bottleneck, the shortage of capital. As we can see from this graph, it's quite clear that China's FDI since 2010 has been steadily remain above $2 billion annually, while the US FDI to Africa has been decreasing since 2009, while there's some fluctuations since 2016 to 2020. President Xi Jinping has pledged to give 120 billion loans and FDI to infrastructure, industrial, and agricultural projects in Africa from 2015 to 2022. These loans and FDI will be delivered by the Chinese banks. And in the whole year of 2021, direct investment in all sectors in Africa was $3.74 billion, increased by 26.1% year on year. With this capital, huge development potential and job opportunities will be unleashed. Next, let's look at the trade cooperation between China and Africa. As we can see from this graph, China's exports to Africa peaked in 2015, while the general trend is increasing over the years. The same goes to China's imports from Africa. There's only one exemption, like in 2015. So the bilateral trade volume reached $254.2 billion in 2021, an increase of 33% year on year. China remains the largest trading partner for Africa for 13 years straight. China also offers favorable treatments for African countries. In 2021, China has increased imports of non-resource products from Africa and offers zero tariff treatment to 97% of taxable items exported to China by the 33 least developed countries in Africa, with the goal of having more agricultural and manufactured goods from Africa gain access to the Chinese market. At the same time, China's CIIE, or China International Import-Export, is also a platform for African countries to export their products to China. Meanwhile, in order to narrow the digital gap between Africa and the rest of the world, The Chinese companies have forged close cooperation with major African operators in achieving full basic coverage of telecommunication services in Africa, and have built more than half of the continent's wireless sites and high-speed mobile broadband networks. By 2021, more than 200,000 kilometers of optical fiber has been laid, giving broadband internet access to 6 million households and serving more than 900 million local people. So the digital economy in Africa is flourishing right now. Finally, some thought bubbles. China's presence in Africa has been a hot button topic on social media, especially the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. Well, according to a survey conducted by Afrobarometer in 2014 and 2015, in 36 African countries, more than half of African people perceive China positively. That is to say, China's approaches in Africa have been widely accepted and applauded. Yet there is no one-size-fits-all solution to all of the challenges faced by African countries. As now we are seeing Africa is heading towards a brighter future envisioned in its Agenda 2063, which aims to build an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. Therefore, we are calling for more cooperation with Europe, the US, and other countries to seek win-win results there. Thank you.
Thank you. In this final section of our first panel, we're going to play some videos from close collaborators. Actually, well, two remaining. Well, let me play this one, which is a video that comes from France, from our very good friends there with Solidarité et Progrès, led by Jacques Cheminade. And this video is put together by Sebastian Lantrade and Shireen Sultan.
Hello everyone, and thank you for International Schiller Institute for giving us the floor in this important conference. First, to understand the work being done in France with respect to the One Belt and Road Initiative, and one must take the motto, France recognizes countries, not regimes. Yet France itself is occupied by finance, and its leader does not have the support of the people. The words of the President Emmanuel Macron at the United Nations General Assembly last September sound like an international echo of his domestic policy: infantilization, guilt-tripping, and blackmail. On a global scale, he does not question NATO's push to crime geopolitics and denies the role of the system in the economic crisis. The only adjustment variables would be the behavior of other states. Infantilization of the non-aligned countries. After having reinterpreted, rewritten, and reappropriated their history, he asked them to break their silence in the conflict and to decouple with Russia. Guilt and blackmail towards Russia, with whom he is willing to maintain dialogue, but not outside his criteria. In reaction to this, new dissident voices are being heard every day, including high-level political leaders. If I cannot list them all, I will name only the most important ones, those of the two-thirds of French people who voted for the anti-NATO extreme left and right in the first round of the presidential elections last April. The challenge today is to unite these fragments of popular bloc. Yet finding tensions punctuated Macron's speech, as he did as early as January 2018 in Xi'an in China, calling them to replace, quote, unilateral imperialism with an art of balanced cooperation around the Silk Roads that reactivate an imaginary of civilization, of fruitful exchanges, and of shared wealth. But the pretty words blur our perception of France's policies, which is actually incapable of committing itself to the necessary level of the Belt and Road Initiative being locked into the European Union, the dollar system, and the imperatives of the Green Deal. Nevertheless, the potential remains to participate in the Belt and Road Initiative. Our technological know-how in nuclear energy is precious. Our thoughts are with Bernard Bigot, Director General of the International ITER Nuclear Fusion Research Project, who passed away this year. We pay tribute to him for his participation a year ago in a conference of the Schiller Institute, and for having breathed new life into ITER, and for having interested young people in science. Second, de Gaulle's thought, which is no longer to be introduced, is still alive, not only in sovereignist circles of all political origins, but even more so in the patriotic instinct of the people to rise up against supranationalist impulses. Or avant-gardism is multi-secular, both in technological innovations and in the intermodality of infrastructures. The Bretton Woods system made the post-war period conducive to reconstruction, and thus allowed all these resources of the French tradition to converge in Gaullian indicative planning, an economy beyond the reach of the models of economic dictatorships characteristic of the Cold War blocs. Ultra-liberal, ultra-capitalist bloc on one side, predatory monopolies created by market games on the one side, and communist Soviet bloc on the other. The central state decides and controls everything, leaving no room for private companies, citizens, local elected officials, etc. The French model of indicative planning can now be recognized in China's application of the Belt and Road Initiative philosophy of adapting while moving forward.
We see this potential that we are revitalizing in our actions here in France. On the one hand, with the Schiller Institute France, but also through the campaigns of the political movement Solidarité et Progrès, whose president and founder is none other than former presidential candidate Jacques Cheminade. Solidarité Progrès and the Schiller Institute are two totally independent entities. However, they are fighting in parallel to make these perspectives of the new Silk Roads known on a national and international scale. Jacques Cheminade is regularly invited to speak at the Schiller Institute majors in the national conferences. Here is a retrospective of their most notable actions since the launch of the Belt and Road initiatives and BRICS in 2013-2014, if not a little earlier. 1995, Jacques Cheminade is a presidential candidate for the first time and is already campaigning on the new Silk Road, Eurasia in the 21st century. 2003, La Roche's youth movement goes on a tour of France and organizes daily debates in the public square on the subject of the new Bretton Woods and mobilizes for Lyndon LaRoche's candidacy for the American presidential elections. Many young people became involved, the most motivated of whom ran in all the elections that followed in France under the Solidarité Progrès banner. Here are a few examples. 2004, they awakened the European campaign with the Eurasian land bridge. 2007, at the legislative elections, they summoned the famous Rosie the Rifter from Roosevelt's New Deal to put Eurasia on the job. 2014-2015, the municipal and departmental elections are their first opportunity since the birth of the BRI and the advent of the new world of the BRICS to decline these issues locally. Their visuals circulate even in high school, where their map of the new Silk Road serves as a support for geography teachers who want to be as up-to-date as possible. June 2015, the Schiller Institute successfully brings together 500 participants in Paris for a conference entitled Rebuilding the World in the Age of BRICS. 2017, as the BRI expands to almost every continent, it is at the legislative elections that SCP candidates are again present to prevent France from missing out on history. November 2018, 4 years after the publication of the very first version in English of the Schiller Institute's comprehensive report, The New Silk Roads Become the World Land Bridge, this work is presented in Paris before 100 people, including embassy representatives. It is still today the only existing document that brings together so many projects from all continents launched in the early days of the initiative led by China, and shows through numerous maps and small details the concrete developments aspects of the countries concerned. A proactive lobbying is also conducted around infrastructure projects from which France would greatly benefit, such as the Aropa port complex, the Train of the Future space train, or the Seine-Nord Europe Canal. September 2019, Jacques Cheminade, president of Solidarité et Progrès, is invited alongside with Helga Zepp-Larouche, president and founder of the Schiller Institute, to the think tank's conference of the 8th Euro-Asia Economic Forum in Xi'an, the historical cradle of the Silk Roads. 2019-2021. In the summer of 2019, Solidarité et Progrès and a group of Yellow Vests joined forces in the face of the oligarchic enemy practicing its international domination from deep within France. They organized a rally in the city where the franc CFA is printed, the currency used in 10 African countries. It is indeed the same straitjacket as the euro. In January 2021, the solidarity with the freedom of peoples is exported to Mali, where Sébastien Périmoni is brought to represent Jacques Cheminade, accompanied by a figure of the Yellow Vests. 2022, Solidarité et Progrès continued the efforts begun more than a year earlier to unite the sovereignist forces in the national elections. At the presidential level, the means and time are lacking to overcome the obstacles in the expression of a constructive voice close to the people. But it is a great success at the legislative level, with 12 Solidarité Progrès candidates present under a common banner with other movements. Today, this momentum has just been taken to the international level with the arrival in our capital of Diane Serre and Dennis Speed for the last great conference of Solidarité et Progrès in Paris. Their testimony of the resistance inside the United States reinforces the links between these campaigns on both sides of the Atlantic. History is now being made in New York, and I invite all who can to join Diane Serre on the ground. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Sebastian and Shireen, for that very informative presentation. Very exciting. So I have a pleasure to introduce the video of Dana Annex, who is a classical music educator in Chicago.
As those of us watching and participating in this conference are well aware, we find ourselves now in a stage of imperialism in which productive capacities are being destroyed in order to concentrate control of resources in the hands of the global elite. Part of this apparatus of economic destruction is the public education system, which in its current form functions to hinder the capabilities of the broad masses of people. It separates parents from their children for 7 or more hours a day, alienates families from the educational process, fosters a strong distaste for study among the general population, and indoctrinates children to defend imperialism as long as it has a socially liberal facade. Pending revolution, we must push the limits of what is possible under bourgeois public education through the curriculum. Parents, workers, intellectuals, and teachers who see these problems must unite to find a solution, beginning by implementing a curriculum rooted in Lyndon LaRouche and Helga Zepp-LaRouche's concept of classical education. Following a classical education curriculum, students from a very young age learn the highest form of expression in their native language through poetry, develop their curiosity and problem solving through the study of geometry and physics, and engage in a process of creative discovery through classical music. I am a classical musician and I teach classical violin, viola, and string ensemble classes and after-school programs in Chicago Public Schools. I have also worked as a substitute teacher and assistant in classes during the regular school day in many different parts of the city under many different economic conditions. Across the board, I have observed a tragic degree of unfulfilled intellectual potential among students. In the more impoverished south and west sides of the city, the literacy rate in first, second, and third grade classes is very low. Out of a class of 20 second graders I assisted for the day, for example, maybe 3 students knew how to read. The same 3 students could do addition with single-digit numbers without assistance. Most schools in those parts of the city do not have foreign language, art, or music as part of the day-to-day curriculum. There is virtually no time for play, and students are harshly berated throughout the day by teachers and staff for the smallest infractions. The schools with the worst conditions are blank slates where it would be relatively easy to introduce a classical education curriculum because there is really no existing curriculum to speak of. The underemployed intellectual class must be redirected to serve the working masses, and through this process be re-educated themselves. Now, I will turn my focus to one particular school on the far west side of Chicago, where I teach in an after-school strings program for 4th through 6th grade students. The program takes place 4 days a week for nearly 2 hours each day. At this school, the conditions are relatively better than what I have seen at other schools. Most students can read and write pretty well by 3rd grade. They have some wonderful teachers who treat them with respect, and they have a general music teacher who, to me, seems very bright and engaging. However, these students are still performing far below their potential for reasons internal and external to the school environment. Chicago is very segregated, and the most economically underdeveloped and violent areas, such as this one, tend to be majority Black. Along the main thoroughfare, less than a quarter mile from the school where I teach, there are boarded up, rundown buildings and dozens of people staggering or doubled over in the street, drugged to oblivion. I see parents walking their children home from school through this scene of destitution and misery. The high rates of violent crime affect children even during the school day. I have had one very intelligent and musically gifted 4th grade student complain daily of extreme exhaustion due to the sounds of drag racing and gunfire taking place on her street throughout the night. Being immersed in these ugly and violent conditions, children receive the message that prosperity, safety, and beauty are not for them. This year, I'm working to implement a classical education curriculum in this after-school program, and I will be documenting its progress for those who wish to attempt a similar curriculum at their schools. Though the problems we observe in the education system will not be resolved through changes in the curriculum alone, even at an early stage of implementation, I see profound changes in my students, particularly in their self-discipline, intellectual curiosity, and problem-solving abilities. The classical curriculum consists of 3 broad categories of study, the first of which I call repertoire and poetry, the second of which is practical music theory, the branch of music theory concerned with developing the skills needed to play, sing, or compose more effectively, and the third of which is speculative music theory, the branch of music theory which deals with the scientific and philosophical aspects of music. For the portion of their study devoted to learning repertoire and poetry, the students are learning to play the melody Ode to Joy on their instruments. I am taking this opportunity to play Paul Robeson's rendition of Ode to Joy for them, in which he sings both the original German and an English translation. Paul Robeson's recordings provide a wealth of melodic and poetic material for students, especially considering that he performed songs from the classical repertoire, traditional American songs, and worker songs from around the world. The music and text are simple enough for them to understand and emulate, but are beautiful, meaningful, and performed at the highest level of musicianship. I also think it is important for students to hear these classics sung in a Black American voice, because the classical culture that we develop here will not be simply transplanted from elsewhere. It will be a characteristically American classical culture. For their practical music theory training, they are working on developing the skills they need to write into voice counterpoint. Currently, the students are learning to write and play in a few major keys and identify intervals. I'm having them play some common contrapuntal patterns, which were commonly used in composition from roughly the time of Mozart. Once their skills have developed further, I plan to have them learn to identify, use, and elaborate on these patterns in practice. Today, this kind of music is often derided as formulaic, but I think that stems from a misunderstanding of creativity. Lyndon LaRouche stressed the importance of writing in counterpoint for children because it teaches them the importance of convention and order in the creative process. Both classical and popular cultures are currently in decline precisely because individualistic breaks from collective creative endeavors are so encouraged and incentivized. Instead, we should encourage the younger generation to draw on enduring tradition and ideas in their creative processes. For their speculative music theory work, they will recreate the experience of ancient music theorists. Ancient speculative music theory was founded on experimentation with properties of a vibrating string. It is possible for even a beginning level student to actually play and hear the harmonic series on their instrument. So students can begin from very early on in their training to understand the relationship between acoustics and human invented musical practices, such as the conventions of harmonic tonality, meaning the typical harmony and structure of music in major and minor keys. With this simple hands-on activity, they begin to learn to analyze features of the natural world in relation to human perception, understanding, and creative activity. Through this analysis, they can come to an understanding that the music of Bach, for example, did not just come to him one day. His genius was to a great extent the product of building upon centuries of creative discovery. Now, having presented a very particular view of the current state of the education system and a very particular set of solutions, I'm interested to hear others present their view, their solutions, and their reasoning. From there, we can construct a more general picture of the situation and determine our way forward.
Thank you, Dana. And she will also be joining us along with our previous speaker, previous video contributor for the Q&A. So we're going to finish up our panel with two speeches. And the first of them is by Nicholas Holman. He's a member of the LaRouche movement.
Hello, everybody. Oh, good? Okay.
Let me see if I've been this whole time.
Okay, so I'm trying to persuade you all to read some philosophy, and I want to start off by saying what philosophy is and why it's beneficial. Maybe a lot of you don't have a lot of free time. You think, well, you've got to save the world. What does learning some arcane philosophy have to do with that? A lot of obscure and unusual professors in our schools today think that a philosopher contributes best to the world through pragmatism and through skepticism. That is, an idea is presented and a philosopher disputes it, tells you why it's false, why you shouldn't do that. This is not what I'm encouraging you all to do. And it's also extremely alien to the examples of philosophy that we find in classical literature, and even to the actual meaning of the word. The word philosophy is the combination of two words. They're Greek words, philos and sophia. That means that they're love and wisdom. And a lot of people say that. I think they say that in every philosophy 101 class, but they rarely stop to explain what it means. See, anybody who doesn't love something, clearly not a philosopher. Anybody who cannot explain the wisdom in that which he loves, clearly not a philosopher for the exact same reason. So I think it's extremely inappropriate to call anything philosophy except for this: the science by which people discover the wisdom in what they love. See, I don't think philosophy can persuade somebody to love something. So with respect to politics, which is an example of the science, philosophy doesn't persuade somebody to love humanity itself. They need to begin with that love. But once they do, there are lots of benefits that they can receive from the study of philosophy. What I would like to pick on in particular is courage. See, lots of people have courage, but by having a particular scientific understanding of the object of their courage, it's transformed into something better. Lots of people have courage, and maybe some of them love humanity, so why don't they act, right? I think we encounter this inertia all the time, especially when we're organizing on the street or we're talking to people we know. They understand, they can imagine a better world, but they don't know it. They think there are all sorts of things that can be done, but none of it must be done by me. This is because they don't have a scientific understanding of what they're trying to do. So in times of stress, a philosopher and a non-philosopher will have very different responses when the object of their love is in danger. Somebody who simply loves a thing without its understanding, they can say plenty of things that would improve it, but they can't pick a particular thing because they don't have necessary knowledge of it. What I'm trying to say is that the philosophy takes their courage, and by saying what it necessarily requires in order to, what it needs to provide to the object of its love, or what the object of the philosophical study is, it transforms courage, which it can be acted upon or it cannot be acted upon. It transforms it into conviction, transforms it into something which must be done. This is something that follows naturally from the exposition of scientific principles. It follows from the study of geometry and the study of physics, but also from the study of ethics and the study of politics in general. That if you want to act on a thing necessarily, you're going to need to begin by understanding it scientifically, which is the purpose of philosophy. So thank you. You should all read Plato at the end.
Sorry, I thought I was putting it in here. I should be quiet. Thank you very much, Nick. And I want to point out to people that you can go into, I think we have it right near the end. Yeah, the last page of the pamphlet has a short paragraph or two written by Nick in which he proposes particular Platonic dialogues that you can start with or that you can study even if you've already studied them before. So, thank you everyone for continuing with us through this first panel of Build the New Paradigm, Defeat Green Fascism. And I'm very glad to introduce our last speaker on the panel, Ashley Tran, a member of the LaRouche movement.
So right now, the world is on the brink of nuclear catastrophe, now more than ever before. Each week, there are new developments of NATO terrorist attacks, the bombing of Nord Stream 1 and 2, the bombing of the Crimean Bridge, and the creation of the Ukrainian kill list, which features over 25 members of the Schiller Institute. With the threat that we face today, it is imperative to honestly investigate the root cause of this crisis. A theory that has been presented in the mainstream media is one that is called the 1619 Project, that the founding of the American Republic was in response to the British Empire's gradual abolition of slavery. Is this true? Is this theory, which is currently being used to justify the complacency of our White House leaders to the degradation of America, is this conception of our country based on the same theory that is now the supposed root of our destruction? An honest look at our founding documents is necessary to investigate this question. First, we must address the Federalist Society as a fraud. They claim that they trace their lineage from the likes of Alexander Hamilton. But if so, where is our Hamiltonian banking system? Where is our national bank? Rather, our policies can be traced back to those that are in opposition to Hamilton. British thinkers like Martin Van Buren, Andrew Jackson, and Thomas Jefferson. These are not Hamiltonians, but British agents. Our Constitution was crafted as a unit centered around this question of the General Welfare Clause, rather. That we, the people of the United States, must provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty in order to form a more perfect union. establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility to ourselves and our posterity. This is the basis of our Constitution, not merely to defend the country and to provide for our people, but to uphold the principle which is also expressed in the Declaration of Independence, the idea of the pursuit of happiness of all persons. The pursuit of happiness does not pertain to greed or utilitarian notions or the maximization of sensuous pleasures, as our current globalist leadership believes and bases our policymaking on, but what fundamentally separates humanity from animals, our creative and reasoning capabilities. The agapic realization of the meaning of being human, the right to participate in this creative process, and the right to pursue the potentiality of humanity. The American Republic was founded upon these principles. Since then, this country has strayed far from the founding principles laid out in our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Any honest American will admit that our nation is now the perpetrator of the same acts of the unjust barbarism which the British Empire has imposed upon the 13 colonies and for which we fought the American Revolutionary War to liberate ourselves from. But today, we are seeing an expression to reunify our nation once again, as per this conference. The International LaRouche movement has been a leader in providing those exact solutions to counteract the Malthusian neocolonial policies of the Anglo-American globalist elite. The LaRouche movement's greatest contribution that can be seen today is the policy of the World Land Bridge, which became China's Belt and Road Initiative. This proposal was based on the discoveries of the Hamiltonian American economic system that was designed after the American Revolution when the United States had amassed a great deal of debt. His process of assumption, which nationalized all of the state debts and secured the means for making payments on it, turned all the debt into stable credit for mega infrastructure projects to rebuild the post-war nation. This tradition was the ingenuity in which the solution of the World Land Bridge arose from, a dedication to total physical economic development of formerly colonized areas in the world and of every nation, including the United States. The World Land Bridge is a network of development corridors connecting all nations with water, power, transportation, and agro-industrial industries. A solution of peace through development and win-win cooperation between sovereign nations. When President Xi Jinping announced the inauguration of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, the foundation of the new Silk Road took shape under the 5 main principles: educational and cultural exchange, policy coordination, connectivity, unimpeded trade, and financial integration. China's rise bears witness to a power of commitment to these goals towards peaceful development between countries. This model is now a global inspiration and has reinvigorated undeveloped regions in the world, specifically in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, to work with China to fulfill those same goals and aims to decouple from the monetarist, speculative policies of the Anglo-American Empire and uplift their people to sovereignty. We see this undertaking in the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative through China-Afghanistan cooperation. This past month, we witnessed a milestone of international freight and road transportation, which shipped containers mostly containing vehicle parts from China to Afghanistan in a matter of 11 days, as compared to the travel time of 1 to 3 months on the current route to send cargo from China to Afghanistan through Pakistan via the seaport of Karachi and overland. The freight shipment traveled along the first leg of about 500 kilometers to the city of Kashgar in Xinjiang to Osh in southern Kyrgyzstan by road, since the rail is currently in planning for construction. At Osh, the cargo was loaded onto the trains of Uzbekistan's rail network across the border in Adijan. It then crossed eastern Uzbekistan and headed south into Afghanistan to arrive at Haraton, which links with the northern Afghan city of Mazar-e-Sharif along the Uzbek-built railway line. China's humanitarian efforts in Afghanistan have made the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan diplomatic ties ever more crucial. In Xi's letter published in Uzbek media prior to the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Samarkand, he emphasized the importance of the infrastructure projects that connected China to Central Asia and Afghanistan. All 4 lines of the China-Central Asia natural gas pipeline run through Uzbekistan. The tunnel on the Angren-Pap railway line, the longest tunnel in Central Asia, has been successfully completed. More transport potential is being unleashed from the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan highway and the China-Kazakhstan-Uzbekistan railway. And preparations for the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway project are well underway. Uzbekistan is thus transforming from a landlocked to a land-linked country. This is the realization of the potential of the Belt and Road Initiative, which America and NATO-aligned countries have impeded upon from their own people and nations. We have deprived our own citizens of the discoveries, connections, and advancements of our civilization under the guise of a false notion of American principles. For America to renew its commitment to the principles outlined in our founding documents, we must commit ourselves to the World Land Bridge. Now, the Belt and Road Initiative, as other nations have done, as a continuation of our Hamiltonian lineage. The foundation upon which a new paradigm is being built today should include the United States as an actor of industrializing the world as per our own history and tradition. Therefore, this mission requires the ending of the Federal Reserve as it currently exists to be replaced with a national Hamiltonian bank. It is necessary to abolish the CIA, FBI, and their outgrowths as to not disrupt the economic growth of each individual nation. To initiate to initiate a new cooperative and diplomatic relationship with developing nations, it is imperative that we leave the NATO and G7 blocs, which have been the sources of the barbaric Malthusian policies. It is only with a central vision of the World Land Bridge that the American people will continue to fulfill a true pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Ashley Tran. Okay. Well, we've made it to the Q&A period, dialogue period. We want you to be able to ask questions of Jackson, Jason, of any of the speakers who submitted video contributions. I want to see if I can check with David over here, who is running everything. And by the way, everyone, please give a round of applause for David DeBroat. This is the power behind the curtain of the Schiller Institute International Online Conferences. So can you tell us who we have on from our international speakers? Excellent. And Dana's on too. Very good. Okay, well, I'd like to see if we could bring Helga up onto the screen. We're going to hear from Helga briefly. Hello, Helga. Would you like to take prerogative here to comment on anything that has been said on this panel? Or give your response,
No,
rather?
I'm just very happy about all of these contributions, because as I have said many times, at other occasions, the whole world really looks at, is there a voice in Europe and in the United States showing reason and hope that cooperation is possible? And I think especially when young people come forward and, make such clear statements, like, for example, the last speaker, Ashley, just did, or that people are indeed going back to a classical tradition, as Dana did, and all the beautiful speeches by Princey and by the Chinese speaker whose name I unfortunately didn't catch. I think this is very, very important. So I don't want to make any more comments other than expressing my deep happiness.
Wonderful. Okay, now we have a little bit of a technical challenge we got to handle here inside, which is that getting questions from people, we need to make sure we have someone to bring the microphone to them. So I'm gonna, maybe Jason, you can help with that for the first moment, but if we could get Mike, if someone could help us to take up that role, whoever is available. Very good. Zaira, you want to come and help with that? Come on up. Okay, so I would like to begin with a question that was submitted from Uganda, and it concerns the challenges made by the European Union to EACOP, EACOP, a major Ugandan pipeline project, and you'll learn about it from a wonderful, a leading petroleum engineering student at Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, and her name is Rahma Nantongo.
EACOP is a short form for the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, and it's a pipeline that is built, that is connecting the oil wells, the oil projects in both Tilenga and Kingfisher from an area called Kabale Hoima up to Tanga in Tanzania. So the pipeline is about 1,443 kilometers, and it's a 30-meter corridor. And the pipeline is underground, passes through, it passes through a few forest reserves, yes. But the prospects, currently the pipeline is at the stage where compensation of project affected persons is taking place. The pipeline, unlike what was pointed out, they had said 100,000 people have been affected by the pipeline, which is not true, but 3,648 persons have been directly affected by the pipeline. Currently, the percentage of compensation that has been completed is about 60%, and no construction can go on until 100% compensation is achieved. But we figured, why don't we have a sort of event which was concluded today, the MPGS Oil and Gas Symposium. I think you've been seeing it running under the hashtag Makerere Oil and Gas Symposium. We wanted to bridge the information gap, which we believe is the source of the controversies, the propaganda, the misconception, and the doubts we have as, of course, Ugandans at large. So when we are seeing, as students of Makerere, we are seeing these steps being taken. We are seeing these livelihoods being improved. We are seeing an opportunity for us to move from biomass, which is the biggest source of energy, the biggest consumed energy. I could say about over 70% of Ugandans have to cut down a tree to look for food. If we are fighting emissions and we have an opportunity to have a supply of LPG that will be from a product of refined Ugandan crude oil, why wouldn't we be in support of something like this? Why wouldn't we have as many sources of energy in our energy mix as we look at transitioning to cleaner energy? We have hydroelectricity as a clean source of energy, but how many people can access it? And why? Few people can, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. You can't expect a person who has been cooking from a charcoal, from firewood, to own a gas cooker. The closest they could have a gas cooker or an electric plate, even those who can, there is still a mix. Refilling this gas cylinders is expensive on our side. I'm talking now in terms of an average Ugandan in their home. Personally, in our house, we take a while to even refill our gas cylinder when it runs out because it's cheaper to use charcoal. But now imagine we had our own LPG in surplus, it would be at a lower price. Yes, while we are able to access maybe electricity for lights as we use our LPG to cook. We as Makerere Petroleum and Geology Society looked at these enormous benefits. The opposition, the people opposing this project, raised human rights concerns. They have a right to. There were alleged arbitrary arrests surrounding the ECOP pipeline. And we have, through our symposium that we held today, we were able to forward this course with these things. We wanted to know, are these things true? Is it real? And it's nothing of the sort.
Okay, I switched to lapel. Yeah. So these are excerpts from a longer interview that I did with Rama, which we'll look forward to speaking to her more. Okay, I'm just gonna. Thank you for your patience. I will look forward to speaking to her more and learning more and working with her. She's one of the people who's pushed the hashtag Youth for ECOP, which is opposing the efforts of hashtag Stop ECOP, EACOP, which is a campaign that has among its supporters organizations that are financed by the U.S. State Department to try to block this pipeline project from being built. And you heard from her. I hope you could grasp what she was trying to communicate: the improvement of life that this project will result in for people in that area. So if there are any of the panelists who would like to comment on this, you're welcome to, including Helga, of course, or anyone, including Sheshu. And anyway, pardon me. In the meanwhile, I'd like to ask you guys who are here in the audience to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. And then Zaire will bring it over to you. Looks like Simon over there. Zaire got there first. If you go to Simon up in the front. He's got a fast hand. He was ready.
So first off, before I ask my question, I just want to say every single speech so far has just been absolutely spectacular. It's been mind-blowing. This is an amazing event. Truly, truly, truly. Either way, my question is for whatever speaker wants to answer it. I'm sure one of the LaRouche folks, probably Helga or Jason, would like to, but here it is. Do you believe that the recent talks of BRICS becoming BRICS Plus, as well as the discussions regarding a commodity-backed international trade currency to subvert the dominance of the US dollar, signal to us that LaRouche's economic predictions are coming true? If so, what is the next step for BRICS nations in progressing the win-win cooperation economic model?
Thank you. You're going to take it? Oh, of course. Okay, let's hear from Helga, and if Jackson, if you'd like to go ahead, please do. But Helga?
Well, I tend to think that the answer to your question is yes, because, I know how many thousands of speeches we have made. We have an international movement in Latin America, United States, Europe, we branch out into the Middle East. I know that in the last, decades, we have made hundreds of conferences and seminars, and it will take the work of a historian to trace back exactly how all of this went into this process. But I think, if you compare the ideas, the commodity-based currency idea, who came up with that? It was Lin. And thankfully, Sergei Glaziev said it very bluntly. He said, what is being implemented right now with the Belt and Road Initiative is the ideas of LaRouche. And every country who uses these ideas is successful. And obviously, those who don't, look at the condition of Europe, which was so vividly described by Jackson, which I can only agree with. Europe is crashing against the wall right now because they stick to the neoliberal system. So I'm very optimistic. And therefore, I think the task is really that we get the people in the United States and in Europe to just stop this idiotic geopolitical confrontation and say, look, your system is not working out. There is a system emerging right now which is doing everything right for the people of the countries who participate. Why don't we just cooperate and stop this confrontation? And I think if there is a powerful, voice emerging, especially from young people, but young people catalyzing farmers, trade unionists, just reaching out to absolutely everybody. And, I would like later on to say something about this idea of a movement of world citizens. I think we are on the verge of winning this. So I'm actually very confident that it can be done.
Thank you, Helga. Let's go to another question here. Let's see. I reserve the moderator's right to choose. Okay, but let's go up here to the front. There's someone already. Oh, sorry, I couldn't see.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, hello.
My name is Irving Lee. I'd like to thank the Schiller Institute for organizing this conference, and I see there are plenty of activists here that we can talk and meet and discuss strategy and politics. I know the emphasis of this conference is to focus on the World Economic Forum and the globalist and green fascism, but here in the States, it's clear to me that the dominant force politically that's driving U.S. foreign policy, of course, is the deep state or national security state, and that all roads to political power means that we have to overturn the deep state. And it's clear that I call them the Anglo-Zionists, because obviously the Zionists in the United States have played a big role in implementing the policies of British Empire concepts in this country. And I think the focus right now for the American public is to challenge this power that controls both parties, and that we need to unite and build a united front in order to transform America and reestablish the republic. So that's a question, I guess, a topic for discussion.
Thank you, Irving. Given the sound situation here, which we'll try to address this for the second panel, I'd like to ask anyone who'd like to speak to come up. Jackson, if you'd like to respond, I'd be very much invited.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I'll just, excuse me, I'll add one thing. As far as the Republican Party goes, I think most of you understand that there are some within the MAGA movement who are in Congress already and going to be in Congress after the midterms that are brilliant when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. Absolutely brilliant. They're calling all the balls and strikes out. Thomas Massey is probably chief among them, Rand Paul, and then others that are kind of just calling out the funding and stuff like that, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. But when it comes to China and the war on the way with China, most of them suck, and they resemble like a Bannonite, Steve Bannon sort of principle when it comes to war with China, and they are supportive of it. So that's one thing that I think we should be very weary of when we look at any sort of hope in the Republican Party. I say it's not there. I say it's not in either party, and they're both controlled by that deep state. So I agree.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, I'm looking especially for youth voices who would like to participate in this conference. So if you'll forgive me, I'd like to get, let's take one in the front and then we'll go in the back after that. And because we have about 25 minutes, and I want to make sure we get a few more questions in from people who are not here but are watching from overseas or from other places, I'd like to ask that we do those two together, and then we'll get response from the panelists, from whoever would like to respond. So please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of this analysis of green fascism, how it's being used to implement this agenda. But I was wondering if anyone might be able to address, it seems like China is making a transition to green energy and a lot of, so what is going on there? What is the reality of the threat that they say we're being faced with? Jason Ross, you said it's often hard to know what the truth really is, and that's what we should do. So I was wondering if anyone might want to address that.
Thank you so much. Let's hear the other question, and then we'll get a response to the both of them. I think that's a very important question for us to discuss here. In the back, yes, all the way.
All right, good morning.
All right, I'm going to be shutting down the stream. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it. I want to thank the Schiller Institute for putting that on. There is a second panel that's happening this afternoon that's available. I'll put up the link here in just a moment, or you can find that over at the Schiller Institute's website as well regarding the second panel that's happening. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and also do me a favor, make sure you hit that subscribe button. CJOMC, this YouTube channel, and let me bring this up real quick so that way it's there. Yeah, so hit the subscribe. Lots of content being created in the future for future postings as well as live stream. And then also you can follow me over at Twitter, which is over at Producer CJ1. Everyone have a blessed day. Stay safe. Take care.